let's go from basics. Ask any pianist what is a pianist. One of the main concerns is to bring out the right hand, because the right hand usually is a melody. Yes? So melody, that is big word. And when we say melody, we always assume that the melody is the highest pitches in a piece of music. But what I discovered is, wait a minute, if I look at the voice leading, which is in that piece, then the whole thing doesn't make sense. This bringing out the top voice does not add up.
Now, wait, just so the audience is clear, we're talking
Yeah.
about your the last released article, where you talk about basically just a misunderstanding that pretty much everyone does when they play this famous piece by Mozart, the Fantaisie and the Sonata. The actually published at the same time, maybe not composed at the same time, but maybe, I don't know. You could help me. Published at the
You're
same time
right.
as a single opus, right?
Yes, you are right. They were not composed at the same time, but they were published under one single opus number, which Mozart gave it as opus 11. So then the question arises, why did he publish two pieces which he composed about half a year apart? Why did he publish them together? And this is the big question. And then, of course, the next question is, where is the melody? And well, I continue your questions, and then I wish I had a piano here, but I'm upstairs in the on the third floor where I don't have a piano. But
Yep.
I had to come here because the internet here is much better than downstairs, and I don't want to give you
Right.
trouble.
Well, okay. So you set it up very well, and so the sorry, not the Fantasy and Sonata, published as a single opus,
Mhm.
and I mean, this is a level of insight that perhaps most pianists don't even think about. Maybe they just see a clump of notes and they just try to go from point A to point B.
Well,
And
and
you're
they have
speaking.
they have a good reason not to think of it, because Mr. Köchel, who did the Köchel Verzeichnis, he gave them two different numbers. So one number is, and this is funny too, one number is 475 and the other one is 457. So, so of course, a pianist who doesn't know any music history will think that these are definitely two separate works. But Mozart didn't feel it like that, didn't think like that. So
So
Mozart must have known something,
do
which we don't
people
know.
do people generally think that these are two separate pieces? Is that the popular perception?
It's not only the popular perception, but I talked twice with Alfred Brendel, and I was very disturbed because he went around the world giving piano recitals with these two pieces. And he put one piece in the beginning of the program and the other piece at the end of the program to make sure that it never enters the audience mind that these pieces have anything to do with each other. So, as you can tell, I'm not mainstream, but I'm not trying to be different.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand the
No,
music.
whatever is just the most accurate information is what we want. What is the truth? So, what set you on this path? How did you even think about this issue?
The way I set about it is, uh, you you have to understand a little bit my background. I come from what used to be formerly the Soviet bloc, and we used to hear all the great artists coming from Russia. Well, then it wasn't Russia, then it was the USSR. And then, because I didn't have a piano there in my grandfather's birth village, I brought with me a complete book of Mozart sonatas, and I had this ability to read music and to hear it. I didn't really need a piano. So I went through all the Mozart sonatas, and as far as I'm concerned, that is where I really learned partimento without ever knowing about it. And I could immediately tell if something was off. I would think, oh, Mozart couldn't have written it like that. That's how deep the knowledge I acquired already when I was about 12 years old. And
Amazing.
and that and then I read about this letter where the father, Leopold Mozart, tells his son, you don't have to write big works. All you need is to write works that have the quality that is necessary. And then he mentioned this Italian word il filo. And il filo, of course, means the connecting thread. And so when I heard about this connecting thread business, I tried to see if there is a connecting thread in the Fantaisie. And if I played the top pitches as the melody, then there was no thread. And that is how, so it was completely based on voice leading that I was able to untangle the piece. And as you can see there, how strange that is. Mozart could have written that in two different systems, the right hand system and the left hand system. But in measure 2 and measure 4, he amassed everything into the right hand system.
And that's Mozart's fault.
No, it's not his fault, but uh, I you could say it like that too. From our contemporary eyes, it is a flaw. And as a matter of fact, he had the opportunity when he did his um, uh, list of compositions. There, he used both systems to write those notes. So he could have, if he had wanted to, he could have given us the actual correct voice leading, but he chose not to. And then the next question is, why did he choose not to? Well, because in those years when he composed these two works, he became a Mason, a Freemason. And it was customary among Freemasons to do things in a hidden way. So this is one of the symbols that the Freemasons, a central symbol of the Freemasons, and so if I want to do something musically that would be connected somehow with Freemasonry, then I would try to make my the opening measures somehow to be a reflection of this symbol.
Right. And so let me ask you about his. So I have here your article, some of the facsimiles. Could you just
Right there, you
describe?
see it.
Could you describe what's in the facsimile?
Right. So there you have the same opening, but this time written on the two right hand and left hand stave, and you can see there uh, the way he writes it. He simply goes by which note is higher and which note is lower. It's the absolute way you would print this today. And indeed, if you look at any Urtext edition, this is what you will see. And then when I went through the piece, I realized Mozart could have given us the actual voice leading using both systems, or both staves rather. As you can see there now, the notes are the same, but they are arranged differently. And so if you think of that symbol you just saw, you see something going up, da, 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 dum, And then in the higher registers, you see something going down. And on top of that, you have crossings of voices.
Yeah.
That voice crossing, that is extremely difficult to perform on the piano in such a way that it can be heard clearly.
Yeah.
So for me, this is a purely performance question that started the whole thing. It had nothing to do with figured bass or tonality or anything. Just I realized gradually that the whole piece makes total sense, and not only the fantasy, but the fantasy and the sonata together make sense. And by the way, Mozart wrote first the sonata, and then he
Yeah.
wrote the fantasy. But then when he published it, he changed it. He put the fantasy first and then the sonata. So there are all kinds of things that should um, make us question why so many changes for something that should be normally so simple. All we know is that the sonata was written in 1784 and the fantasy was written in 1785. And he published them as a single opus. And he changed the order. So there must have been a compositional reason why he did that. Things don't just happen out of nowhere. As they would say, a wind doesn't blow unblown.
Now, what are the for people who just what are the salient points that connect the two works together in terms of musically? So people
Well,
have this idea they're not connected. So what are the major points that connect them?
the major point is if you look with the proper voice leading, you realize that the two works have it's a monolithic theme. It's the same theme in one, it's the same theme in the other. Of course, with the kind of variations that are available to composers. But I have one example. So of course, they when you see that voice leading, you have to be so careful to make it clear where the this mi fa sol la and mi re do si is to be audible. If it's not audible, then it doesn't matter what I know. See, the notes are the same, but the interpretation is different. And when I say interpretation, to me, that's not really the right word because to me, if I think in terms of philo, that's like a law that somehow the whole thing has to be connected, not just in the fantasy, but the two works have to be connected. So
Because there's no
now,
melody, right? If you take out the melody and just play a bunch of chords, it's just
yes, exactly. In other words, it's not just chords. That's the main problem with the people thinking about this music.
okay.
You can see there the differences between the capital letters and the lowercase letters. So if you look at the capital and the lowercase, you will see that the two pitches have all the same pitches. There is an E flat, there is an F sharp, there is a G, there is an A flat, and there is an E flat going to D, going to C, going to B natural. So it's absolutely, it's like bang. You know?
It's one of these obvious things. Okay.
Yeah, it should be obvious, but you see how long it took, and of course we have lost.
Can you explain the scale of the like are you I mean basically I mean this is Mozart we're talking about, one of the most performed composers in history.
Right,
And
right.
this is and also this sonata, I think a very one out of the all his piano sonatas, this is the one that Beethoven was really inspired by. Probably out of the set is probably one
Yeah.
of the more famous ones. And it's
In fact, it's famous because it's one of the few sonatas in the minor key. We only have the A minor And here we have the C minor. Let's see, what other minor sonatas do we know?
Right,
Yeah.
right. What did other musicologists say about that?
Well, I don't know what other musicologists say, but I'll tell you a real story. At some point, I joined the Facebook thing, and and then I saw a and I heard a performance of somebody who became my friend, so to speak. Like you click,
Facebook
okay,
friend.
Facebook friend, yes. And then I pointed out to this lady that, by the way, you play that assuming that the high pitches is the melody.
Mm.
But I said I have a different view of this, and I sent her uh, what I basically
Mm.
already talked about at a symposium celebrating the life of um, Malcolm Frager.
Mm.
And after I sent her that link, she unfriended me. Yes,
Wow,
she just would
that's
not
harsh.
accept. She would not accept such an idea.
That's
And
wow.
you see, you have to realize there is something, in some ways, tragic about this, because every pianist I know who recorded this piece, they all bring out the highest pitches.
Mm.
So basically, especially when that person has, meanwhile, passed away, they have a problem because they left something which
Yeah.
maybe is not uh, quite what Mozart wanted. So yeah, so it's a difficult thing. It's difficult for me because if some people may say, well, he just writes that, and it doesn't matter what he writes because he's entitled to his opinion, and I'm entitled to mine.
Didn't you present this information to Malcolm Frager himself?
Oh yes, I did. And see, Malcolm Frager was an extraordinary musician, so quick, it's incredible. I just sat down to the piano and played for him the voice leading, the way I saw it, I heard it, and within just a few minutes, he immediately understood, and he told me, you have to write about it. This has to become known because it's a completely different piece.
Oh, wow. A completely different piece. I mean, come
Yeah,
on. That's
well, because in the sense
it's
that if I hear, I mean, can you, this thing about intervals for a musician is everything.
Mhm.
I often ask my students, what would you say if you went to a concert and if the orchestra, instead of playing ta 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 ta, they play ta 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 ta? Would you accept that? No, of course not. So that's basic things. So in that sense, he felt that this is absolutely necessary information for any musician. We are talking about musicians. We are trying to understand the music.
Well, like I said, Professor Sass, I mean, you're an unusual one. You actually seem to know a lot about music. You seem to take it seriously,
Yeah,
which is
but you can have also a different opinion, as people say today. And when things like this happen, they usually don't like to deal with
Mm,
this, with a few exceptions, of course.
mm. Can you speak about CPE Bach's harpsichord concerto in G major? I
Yes,
know that Mozart he's quoted as saying Bach is the father, but I know he really admired the other son, J.C. Bach. But what about this
yes,
harpsichord concerto? And let me pull it up in the article.
yes.
Let me pull it up in the article, and I wonder which. I'll find the page first. But why don't you talk
Okay,
about a little bit about that and the concerto itself?
right. Well, I was lucky that I met the Hungarian uh, forte pianist and harpsichordist who has recorded that harpsichord concerto of C.P.E. Bach. And when you look at what C.P.E. wrote, you can very clearly see that Mozart has, let's use that word, honored C.P.E. Bach by taking over his music. He changed it though, and that is yet another point which made me think, because in the CPE, everything is just chromatically shifted.
Mm.
The way you can do today with a computer, you shift something up and down, and then it transposes automatically. Well, but when Mozart shifted the things, he didn't transpose it exactly. He changed it. So he has one version of the first two measures, and then a different version for the next two measures. So again, why?
Can you talk about Richard Bass? Did you
Well,
meet him and did you share this with him?
no, I didn't meet him, uh, and I say it out flatly that I'm not a what you would call a Schenkerian. I don't
Okay.
analyze music using Schenker's ideas of uh, of analysis. But I was so pleasantly surprised to see that a Schenkerian, who of course is very strict in applying the set of rigorous rules, that he comes up with the same voice leading that I came up with. So I wrote to him, and and so he said, well, yeah, he didn't go any further than just the beginning, but he realizes, of course, that you can go beyond the first four measures and find out those musical ideas, which is always uh, four notes. It's either four notes up or it's four notes down. And you will find those four notes everywhere from beginning to end of the uh, so Fantaisie and sonata. And you see, the very nicest thing for me was I looked at the manuscript of the sonata. The sonata was finished by Mozart. The Fantaisie wasn't yet written. So he finished it and he put a double bar line. Then he writes the Fantaisie. Then he crossed out his final measures. And what did he do? He took the opening notes of the Fantaisie and he put them to end his sonata. You see,
That's
there you have that typical thing about the snake swallowing its own tail, which is
wow.
the that image of the Freemasons. There you go. You see how there are the two snakes. There is an ascendant and there is a descendant, and one has a crown and the other doesn't have a crown, and one has wings and the other doesn't have wings. So but yet the two sides are related to each other because each one eats up, swallows, so to speak, the tail of the other one. So it's a perfect circle.
Mhm.
And the
You
Mozart Fantasy and Sonata gives that perfect circle.